I mean, I'm very lucky that I've never suffered from depression. It's not something I've ever really understood personally, although there have been moments where I've had an insight of what it can feel like, but I've had people very close to me that have suffered it, and so I've been able to see through, you know, what it's like for people when they're waking up all the way through the night, being racked by, I think people think depression is like a passive thing, it's like being sad, and often it's not, it's often this full of rage towards the self, and it's active, it's struggle, it's not just simple sadness. Simple sadness can be beautiful for people if like, for example, a psychedelic can help someone access that kind of more simple, pure sadness where they can just weep, and that can be a beautiful experience. But depression is more like a very complicated, very muddy, hopeless feeling of constant self-attack.
Yeah, it's weird when you say that word depression. Yeah, I always think of, oh, someone's just dull and sad today. But it's not that, is it? It's this whole tumultuous thing that on the surface looks like they're disconnected.
Yeah.
But there's actually a really not nice time going on in their brain.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
It's funny how you just described this whole defense mechanism. So I don't know if I've ever been in a depressive state, but I've had that inner critic my whole life. And like maybe some of those behaviors come out in the movie, but I've been so critical of myself that I think that's why alcohol always appealed to me, because it just shut me up for a few hours a night where I could just have some peace.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I was taking shots at myself all day, every day. And it didn't matter that everyone else thought I was accomplished. For me, it was never good enough. And it's still never good enough, but I'm still finding some peace.
Yeah.
And so that was my coping mechanism, not by any means any better than a depressive state. But it's interesting how you talk about a lot of this is childhood trauma related. Do you think it all is?
Well,
also, I don't think trauma is understood very well.
Yeah.
People think, oh, that means that you were sexually abused, or you were punched in the head, or you know, there was a bomb went off in your city. But I mean, from what I understand of trauma, it's usually something that it's just unresolved and you're never able to talk about. And that incident could be something so simple. I've heard people, their dad said one thing to them when they were 10.
yes.
And they never got to resolve it. They never got to talk to anyone about it. And that thing sat inside of them and caused them to go, you know, be a CEO of a company or rob a bank or something crazy.
Absolutely.
So trauma is another word I think sometimes we don't define very well.
Definitely, because it's exactly that thing. So it could be one comment that somebody made once, but if that becomes part of your inner critical system, you could say that to yourself every day. And so it becomes a huge part of your inner furniture.
Right.
So yeah, it's completely different for each person what has caused them that kind of trauma. But I think many of us are essentially a little bit traumatized by our culture here, because we often, there's a kind of striving and loneliness and disconnection from nature and feeling of competition that's in the background. You know, I remember being at school and just that kind of, in fact, my friend who got so depressed, in a way it was like a kind of delayed response to what happened in school, which is essentially, you know, this feeling of we must, even though we went to a nice school, it was like, we've got to get good A-level results, otherwise we're going to be failures, you know, we're not going to be able to have a happy life. And we worked really hard and got incredibly stressed, and just thinking about, so how often we were in like a soothed state. Like I often think it would be really interesting if we had some kind of device that could like tell us, well, we probably do have them now, actually looking at heart rate variability, but like how often we're in a soothed state where we feel like, I'm okay, I feel relaxed, and how often we're in a kind of not quite breathing properly, feeling like there's some threat, but we don't really know what it is, but that we're not quite safe.
Like the parasympathetic mode.
Exactly, yeah.
And you're saying it's probably like 95% to 5%.
Totally.
Right.
And so I think when we grow up with that, and our parents are also in that kind of like, got to do this, you know, we're kind of in fight and flight a lot of the time. We don't have that kind of, so much of that expanse of just, here we are together, a community in our beautiful setting, and we're just going to dance, and we don't do so much of that. No. So we're all kind of a bit frayed, and I think that kind of burnout is a kind of, it's part of our culture, I think.